Hey,
Okay. I'm not
Rob,
touching
what
any
is uh
else.
I was just I was just saying like I think the last two lives I had reception issues and I thought I fixed it, but I still have reception issues. But I know you have reception issues as a default too, so I'm like it could be a perfect mix, perfect
It could,
storm between both of us having reception issues. But it's okay. Um it's good to see you either way. I honestly haven't actually seen Robert on video in probably over like 5 or 6 months since our initial assessment together. Because usually we're just the remote coaching, we do weekly calls together, but not like actual video calls. It's just like a phone call. And then we based mainly look at a lot of Google Docs and documents and stuff of that sort to keep track of what he's doing. But I wanted to invite you on the podcast to obviously tell your story. And it's been kind of like a long time in the making. It even started like way before we even met up about like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago at this point. And I'll just give a quick intro and then let you take over and tell your story. I mean, um, Robert actually was very active even before coming to see me. He was doing like CrossFit multiple times a week for quite a while, and then also just eating fairly well, et cetera, et cetera. But he still had, stubborn body fat and also just like a few health issues that were requiring consistent use of medical drugs that he didn't want to be on as well. And just through certain lifestyle and nutrition modifications, et cetera, he was able to get off a lot of this stuff. And he's going to kind of tell his story of how he was able to do that. And then hopefully some of you struggling with some of the same issues might hear some recurrent themes and be able to also see how it could help you as well. So Rob, take over. This show is all yours. I'm just like an invisible shadow here, and I'll try to ask some smart questions here and there, but it's mainly your show. So start wherever you like in the timeline of your progression, and we'll go from there. We'll just kind of wing it.
sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and thanks for all your help too as a coach. But I'm 52 now, and when I was 40, I was easily 253 pounds. So about pounds right now. And I just decided I wanted to change. I didn't want to be fat and old, and I have a history of heart disease and diabetes in my family, and so I just wanted to avoid those kind of risks. And so I started doing P90X in my basement over about 2 years, and just doing that started off with a good like 45-pound weight loss, but I still wasn't getting the results that I wanted physically and medically and aesthetically either. So I met a friend who owned a CrossFit gym, and so he invited me to on ramp with them and get started with CrossFit. So I did that. That was in I guess 2012. So yeah, it was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and I really enjoyed it. Um, that particular gym and community was a good fit for me. The coach and owner was a physician, so he had a really good grasp on um, good technique and safety and really health driven, wellness driven CrossFit training. So I didn't feel like it was a bunch of meatheads. So I did really well with that too. I continued to lose a little bit of weight, but basically stopped right around like 200, 205 pounds. Um, I started doing Spartan races. I started kind of living an active lifestyle that I never thought I could even participate in. I'm a classical singer. I'm an opera singer. I sing choral music. I sing all kinds of a cappella Renaissance music and stuff like that. Um, so it was never really athletic, and so being able to kind of start living this physical life in a way that I hadn't before felt really exciting. But um, CrossFit still posed a lot of limitations for me as I was getting older too. I was just having a lot of like joint injury. I would work out really hard, and I was having really good workouts and making progress weightlifting, but I also felt like I was constantly in pain, constantly in recovery. And I still, again, was trying to dial in the right nutrition, but I wasn't getting the right guidance in that. I was doing well at weightlifting and Olympic lifting because I had a really good lifting coach. I was in a different gym at that point. And I felt like I was making good progress, but I wasn't one of those like big dogs. I wasn't an elite athlete in the gym. At this point, I'm in my mid to late 40s. And so I just felt like I started getting really kind of disheartened and as to what was going on with me physically. And because of my work, I was able to live in the Czech Republic for a year. So I was living in Prague, and partying much too hard and drinking way too much and eating all the wrong foods. And so my health issues really kind of spiraled out of control at that point. And, so at that point, I had already been taking medications for type 2 diabetes, for high blood pressure, for high cholesterol, for anxiety and depression. You name it, I was on it. So I was on about 7 or 8 different prescription meds at the time. And living in the Czech Republic and living in Europe, I just really kind of abandoned all of my kind of exercise habits and good eating habits, and kind of really just didn't take very good care of myself. And so I had a couple of health crises when I was over there, and it was a really big wake up call when I moved back. And that was about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And I really just wanted to start turning things around. I tried CrossFit again and did the best I could with it. But, then COVID happened. And so I never really got back to CrossFit after COVID. And I really just felt like this is the time that I need to make the conscious decision to change something. Something's got to give, or I was going to wind up with fatty liver or heart disease or something that I was going to be a lot more difficult to dig my way out of. And so, and so somehow this group on Facebook kept showing up. And so I liked on the group. And it was also on the LGBT functional fitness as well. So then I was seeing you like multiple times a day on my Facebook feed, and I would always like on it. So it kept, the algorithm kept bringing you up. And so finally I just felt like I really needed to reach out to you. And so, so this was not quite a year ago, but 8 months ago, 9 months ago, that I started really, my inquiry with you as far as what can I do to make this better? And you were so great at reaching out in a thoughtful way that didn't make me feel like you were pitching me. It didn't feel like, I don't know. I just felt like we were authentically interested in what my particular journey was. And so, so that's when I started. And I think the progress that I've made in the last 8-9 months has been remarkable, both medically and just physically, emotionally. I feel, just happier, more confident. And so it's been a big, I don't know, it's affected so many different things in my life and in my lifestyle. So it's been a really interesting process, but yeah, so right now I'm down, as of today, I'm down 25 pounds. I've lost easily 6 inches off my waistline. I'm making nice gains aesthetically. I feel like I'm building muscle. I'm leaning out. So that's really affected just my confidence and my general overall kind of happiness and wellness. I'm off of, I think now 4 or 5 different prescription medications. So right now I'm down to 3. One for high blood pressure, a statin, and another one for A1C. And so those are the only 3 that I'm on right now. And we're trying to get off of the statin as much as possible. So it's possible. He really is, my physician is hesitating to get me off of the high blood pressure medicine, just because I have had some serious medical issues with high blood pressure, but I've been tracking it over these last few months, and my blood pressure has been tracking really, really well. My lab results are really great. My A1C when I was living in the Czech Republic was, I think it was at 9 point something, impossible, I don't know. And now it's down to like 5.7, I think, was my last labs. So, I'm well within a healthy range. My blood sugar is coming in at a healthy range. And so I feel really good about that. yeah, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. So,
Well,
um,
I think it's safe to say, like, don't visit Prague as a general
no,
rule.
no, it's a great city.
Yeah,
Just don't do it the way I did
health
it.
is
So
concern for
I
you.
fucked up in a lot of
Yeah.
different cities, not just Prague. So
Well, can you go into because I know it kind of starts off like very slow, and then only in like retrospect you look back and you're like, well, how did I get into this place? And especially with kind of I feel like with the use of medical drugs, it always starts with like one like 10 years ago, you know what I mean? And then 2 years go by and then you're on two, but you don't even notice it. And then another 3 years go by and you're like on three. And then you're looking back 10 years later and you're like, whoa, I'm on five. Now I'm like 25 pounds overweight. Like, how the heck did I get here? Especially since you're like physically active already at one point in your life as well, et cetera, et cetera. Can you
mm,
kind of go into um, maybe how that happened and how it kind of like I feel with like especially a lot of people it almost happens like somewhat under the radar because it's such a slow process. You really kind of don't, for most people it is a slow process. You really kind of don't notice it happening year to year, but then eventually like I mentioned, you just kind of wake up one day and you're like on 5 or 6 different medical drugs. You don't feel too well anyways. You're like very overweight, very lethargic, just the vitality isn't there anymore. Is
yeah, I think I grew up in Europe mostly, and so part of that equation was alcohol was a big part of that kind of social structure that I was in. Growing up in Europe was accessible, but I was active doing musical theater, doing professional musical theater as an equity actor, doing professional musical theater up until I was about 30 years old, and I was still at that point remaining well under 200 pounds, so between 165 and 185. And then when I stopped doing musical theater, also part of it was being on a stage in front of, 600 people 10 times a week. There is such a premium placed on your aesthetics. And so I was mindful of what I ate and how I looked and just what my physicality was on stage. And I think when I stopped having to do theater, I really just kind of was like, fuck it. And I was just eating as much as I wanted and drinking as much as I wanted. And at that point, I started having this, symptomology that was really actually type 2 diabetes. And that was at the age 30. So that was, 20 something years ago was when um, I started on metformin, glyburide, which is a pancreal stimulant, and on Zoloft, just for anxiety and depression. So those three were really the first three prescription medications that I was on long term. And yeah, and then, I just kept kind of putting on weight and it didn't seem like it was so much. Um, but all of a sudden, in those 10 years, when I wasn't really doing any performing at all, um, we had relocated, my husband and I had relocated here to North Carolina to the mountains, and I was building a home. And I kind of just let things go. And next thing I knew, then I was on statins, and then I was on high blood pressure medication because I could never, the cycle of the high blood sugar, you
Mhm.
know, I was taking all of these medications that were supposed to drop my blood sugar, but then my insulin would crank up so much. My blood sugar would drop so much that then I was constantly craving carbs. I was constantly craving sugar, and they made me hungry all the time. And so I felt like, oh, well, it's okay if I eat sweets or eat starches because I don't want to go be hypoglycemic. So I felt like I was constantly balancing this wave of glucose in my system throughout the day, all day long, every day. And that was just messing with my sleep cycle. It was messing with all of my stress and anxiety and cortisol cycles. And I really just felt like, I was on this roller coaster ride for years. And so I tried, when I started doing CrossFit and kind of, 10, 12 years ago, I was able to get off of a lot of those prescriptions um, at that time. And then when I moved to Europe, I was already kind of brought back all of this bad behavior without being on any medications, and then that's when things just like there was a tipping point. And I had a cardiac event when I was living in Prague. I basically had a pre-stroke was kind of where I was. Um, and so I had to take an ambulance ride, and they thought I was having a heart attack, and they thought I was having a stroke. And it was really just like my blood sugar, I think, was over 400. And, it was my blood pressure was through the roof. And they were like, I don't even know how you're conscious. But so it was a big wake up call. And so, yeah, I mean, so the process I've undertaken with you has really helped me examine very closely, like, what is the behavior that I'm participating in addition to kind of the fitness, nutrition, workout part of it, is this whole other really reflective, self-reflective part of your program that I feel like is very different than any other program that I've seen, that helps me look at how did I get here, and why do I continue with these, same patterns and cycles that's reinforcing this poor health and this poor behavior. What can I do to change that? And so I feel like that's kind of been the biggest takeaway for me. Isn't necessarily the work or effort of working out 5 days a week. It isn't necessarily the thoughtfulness behind the nutrition strategy. It really is this emphasis on self-reflection, and really on kind of healing, what it is that's wrong, and why do I keep behaving these ways, as far as overeating or stress eating or drinking or all of these things. So it really has helped me clarify and distill a lot of that down in a way that's still helping me progressively fix it and change it, and not just make it a habit, but make it my lifestyle. So.
Yeah, I find that's from two perspectives. One, I find that's one of the negatives of kind of the use of kind of medical drugs without behavioral change, because in a sense, all it's doing is enabling the person to keep doing the behavior that led them to the problem for a little bit longer,
Mm-hmm.
like a few more years. But then obviously, the problem with that system is that, like, a belief system that, for example, leads to high blood pressure, that's very typical and common. Close to 800 to 900,000 Americans die from just heart attacks every year in just the US alone, not even worldwide. So it's like very common. And I think last time I read into it showed that people, like Americans, have a 33% chance of dying from a heart attack in their lifetime, which
Mm-hmm.
is pretty high. I mean, if you think about it, you go to lunch with basically three friends, and for the most part, like, one of you is dying from a heart attack, so which is really high. And then if you take cancer into consideration, basically one of you is dying from a heart attack, and one of you is either getting or dying from cancer within your lifetime, and then one of you is going to go free, so it's actually like extremely high. And for the most part, I would say it's not genetics based, even if there's a certain genetic predisposition for XYZ. Like I always say, like, yes, genetics loads the gun, but your behavior, of course, like, presses the trigger, etc. And your choices that you make in life kind of contribute to those genetics being able to be expressed, etc., etc. But like I mentioned, like, one of the issues with the medical drug approach, although it's kind of seems like it provides a cure. Let's just mention, like, high blood pressure, for example. Like, oh, you have high blood pressure. Okay, they give you high blood pressure medication. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is the belief system that led to you participating in certain behaviors that led to that high blood pressure eventually are going to lead to a myriad of other mental and physical health issues in a long enough time frame as well. So if you approach it through only the medical model perspective, like, what's your only other option? Just like when other things arise, you're just going to be on more medical drugs. Then this thing arises, you're just kind of like chasing symptoms basically your entire life. And at the end of the day, not feeling that well to begin with, because I mean, you can honestly just ask people just taking a lot of medical drugs, and you can just look at them. You don't even need to, like, ask them, like, how are you feeling? And if they honestly answer, probably still not feeling well, even with all those medical drugs, et cetera, et cetera. And it's kind of the same a little bit from the fitness perspective. If you just approach it from the nutrition and workout perspective, which is, heavily emphasized, people are like, always telling people with weight challenges, for example, like, oh, all you got to do is you just got to work out and eat better, you know? And that's basically the equivalent of telling a person, for example, with like a drug addiction or alcohol problem, oh, you just have to stop drinking. It's like, oh, I wish it was that simple. Like, why didn't I think of that? I just have to stop drinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And of course, you have to go far and above beyond just kind of prescribing workout and nutrition programs for the bulk majority of people. No absolutes, of course. There are some people that really just genuinely need nutrition coaching or just workout coaching because they don't know like what real food is, or for example, how to use movement as medicine. But for the most part, a lot of people like seriously need to change like various aspects of their belief system that are leading to certain behaviors that are leading to the excess weight gain or the high blood pressure or the poor cholesterol numbers or anxiety or depression, like whatever, you name it, because all those things are inevitably symptoms,
Mhm.
and there's the poor lifestyle and nutritional choices. And those poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, you ask like, oh, why would a person want to self-abuse themselves like that? Well, it's a belief system that once again doesn't facilitate health conscious choices that leads to those poor lifestyle and nutrition choices. Usually I'm not going to go into depth here because I want to hear your story, but usually a disconnection in core values, which inevitably will lead to maladaptive behavior to deal with stress, which would lead to poor life nutritional choice, which would lead to excess fat gain or whatever, high blood pressure, X, Y.
Well, and we're in a culture that rewards, stress, that rewards busyness, that rewards. So if you ask someone like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm really busy. I'm super stressed. I have a lot of work, and we're like, oh, good, good. It's like we somehow culturally reward that, and place value. And I'm very fortunate, and I know that not everyone is in the position that I'm in, that I'm self-employed. Um, you know, my husband is successful and has a successful career, so I have the flexibility, of time and of resources in general to be able to spend the amount of time that I do. I don't have a 9 to 5 job, so I don't have those types of stresses that come from that type of work-life balance. So I am in a different place where I am able to spend more time. But I think it's not even that much time, as far as just actually going to the gym. I mean, I have a half-hour commute each way, but that's just because of where I live. I live on the side of a mountain in the middle of the national forest in the mountains of North Carolina. So no matter where I worked out, if I had a home gym, then that's different. But as far as actual time at the gym, that's not a lot of time for me. It's really 90 minutes out of my day, and to think of all the other things I was doing with those 90 minutes, whether it was watching TV or, not sleeping well and taking naps during the day and stuff like that. Like, I'm not participating in that in the same way I was before. I'm sleeping better now. My digestive health is better. I have more energy. I have more kind of clarity and a real different sense of I guess calmness or not anxiety about just going through my day and approaching work, differently. I have more work as far as singing, more than I've had in several years. And in fact, the spring more than I've had in quite some time. And I feel like I don't have any real sense of anxiety about it because I feel like I'm physically well, I'm emotionally well. And now I have time. And also because of kind of lessons that I've learned in this last year as part of your program, I'm able to also apply that now, to how I'm approaching my work, as far as not procrastinating, really starting to kind of chip away at things in a meaningful and thoughtful way. So looking at my work life, approaching that with a sense of purpose and a real methodical nature, the same way that I've approached kind of my fat loss and my fitness journey as well, that it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And so really, my whole fitness journey has really been, 12 years. And this past year has just been, um, the latest chapter in that. But it's not the culmination of that story. It's not the end of that story, So it is um, certainly a turning point, I think, and changed the trajectory of that. But um, yeah, but it's frustrating, I think, to now hear people or hear friends of mine who are like, "Oh, I could never work out that much, or I could never change my diet that way." And it's like, I don't have a very specific diet. It's just a nutrition strategy. Um, and I was eating pretty good food already. I was just eating too many carbs, and I wasn't eating lots of processed foods or fast food. I was just eating too much of the wrong stuff, um, and not at the right times, or not in the right way, not with the strategy. I just didn't know. I didn't know there's so many different, diet plans that are coming at you. And is it paleo or keto, or is it Atkins, or is it all of this shit? And I'm like, I don't know what's best for me. And it really isn't about any of that. It was just about, this is how your metabolism functions. This is how your body works. This is what you need to do in order to make that system work. It's a system, And so if the system's out of balance, it's got to give somewhere, you know. So
Yeah, and you touched on a lot of important subjects. I'll kind of try to break them down here one at a time. First of all, you mentioned like, oh, a lot of people say like they don't have time for themselves, you know what I mean? Like in the sense that they don't have time for their mental or physical health. And this obviously goes into with a little bit of the other topic you mentioned here in terms of Americans, uh, particularly in the mindset of like you're not doing your job unless you're dying your job, or unless you're dying for your job type of mentality. I'll break it down one at a time. So I do hear this often, like people are like, oh, I don't have enough time. And then honestly, like that is actually the case one out of every like 1,000 cases. I've maybe in my 15-year career met like 3 people that genuinely didn't have enough time. Like even right now I'm training some executive guys that have like 3 kids, um, working like 60, 70-hour weeks, plus like traveling multiple times a month, and they still do it. So they're obviously still on 24 hours, just like it's not like they're like all of a sudden operating on a 48-hour day, but they're still making it happen. But uh, my thing is like a lot of people use I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have this, I don't have that to take care of myself. It's just like a form of, as like I got this from Robert Kiyosaki, but it's just a form of escape, because excuses are a form of escape, because they take the responsibility off your shoulders, at least for the time being, because all of a sudden, the solution may not be easy. So first and foremost, but by using that excuse, all of a sudden you don't have to come up with a solution. It's not that stressful. Although that solution is really actually most likely what that person needs at that time in their life, an actual honest solution. But I see this especially a lot from, in various males, like in our group, you see them like the most common thing is like, I don't have time. You know what I mean? I don't have time. It's just a form of escape. It's just a form of escape from responsibility to themselves. And because let's look at it objectively. Let's say, um, so you got 7 days a week. Person is working like 40 hours. My math might be a little bit off here. Person is working like 40 hours a week. Let's say they're sleeping perfectly, which basically no one is doing. Like the average American is sleeping like 5 hours a day.
I can't
Let's say
get it right. So.
Yeah, let's say they're really actually generally sleeping 8 hours a day. So that's like 56 hours a week. Let's say they're also hanging out with their friends and family for 15 hours a week, which no one does that anymore, hang out that much with their friends and family for the most part. And let's just throw like 5 hours in there for like random errands. So even with all of that gone, like if you count the total amount of free time they have per week, they still have like 2 days and probably like 14 hours of free time, 2 full days, 2 full 24-hour days, plus like 14 hours or so of free time every single week, every single week. And how much time does it really take for the people like us? I'm not talking about like you need to get ready for the Olympics and stuff like that. How much time does it really take per week to optimize your aesthetics, your mental and physical health? It takes, I would say, about 10 to 11 hours a week. Somewhere
Mm-hmm.
that, of course, depending on the commute to your gym, you know, if you have an at-home gym, it's even less than that. And I'm referring to that in the sense that it's about like 5 hours for workouts, you know, 5 or 6 hours. And then basically 5 hours or so for all the other background stuff. You know, you got to go get groceries, which you have to do anyways. You have to eat whether you want to eat or not anyways, you know, so that task is already kind of included. And that's it. So even once you know, work 40 hours a week, sleep 8 hours a day, hang out with your friends and family 15 hours a week, have 5 or 10 hours for errands per week, uh, optimize your physical health, optimize your mental health, optimize your aesthetics. You still have like 2 full days of free time left every single week, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, you guys, we're on the weekend here. If you sit down and just kind of write out your schedule in full detail and really see where your hours are going, and you really aren't like delusional and honest with yourself, you will see that is the case. Like 90% of your weeks, that's going to be true. Sure, there might be a sprinkle of weeks here and there, like they're super busy, you know, and that rule might not apply. But literally 90% of your weeks, pretty much all year round, are going to look like that. You probably have a total of 2 days worth, 48 hours of free time, literally every single week. And that's way more than enough to read like a bunch of books, to work out a bunch, or to attend to any hobbies that you feel might be missing in your life at that point. Maybe, um, you know, let's say you maybe are missing love in your life. So maybe it's a good opportunity to invest more time into that, you know, read books on that, go out more, maybe join some groups so you can have a higher chance of meeting more people, et cetera, whatever. But I'm just saying that the possibility is there if you're just kind of not um, wasting your time. But in the sense, wasting their time is moreover just like another form of escape, you know, another form of dissociation. Usually I find people do because the solution that they're looking for is too hard to come up with. And oftentimes, you know, they do need to like hire a mentor or someone like that. I've hired many myself because it's very hard to come up with a solution with a belief system, a solution to a problem with a belief system that led to that exact same problem. Sometimes it does happen coincidentally, but once again, it's like, it's pretty rare. What would you have to say to, let's say you're a coach right now, Rob, which I think you honestly should become one, you know, because I think you would honestly be a really good coach, and it could be like a cool side job or main job,
I've
especially.
thought about it.
Uh,
Yeah.
but what would you say if, like, you know, you told, you actually probably run into this, as you mentioned, a lot of people are like, oh, I just don't, let's say they're not feeling well, they're not looking well, they don't like how they look, and you go, well, why don't you do this, and it would probably work for them, like what you did as well on this program, and they go like, I don't have the time. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think because I was, you know, and again, because my time schedule is different, I can't compare myself to anyone else. You know, I don't have kids, I don't have a 9 to 5. So, but I do spend, you know, but I was spending a lot of time like watching TV. You know, how much time was I spending watching TV and feeling guilty about not doing all of the other stuff I wasn't doing, you know, and then by watching TV was just opening up an opportunity for me to like snack and to drink. So part of part of I guess what I would ask somebody is like, what do you consider leisure time, or what's time that's just really absolutely wasted? You know, we look at, say, like driving, a commute. You know, I commute half an hour to the gym to and from, and I used to listen to a lot of just kind of talk radio or use that time sometimes to prepare for music that I need to learn. Um, so that's an important time for me that I spend in the car. But I was really feeling regretful about not having time to read as much as I wanted to, or to go back to some of the literature that I really enjoyed when I was younger and revisit that time again. And so I've started listening to a lot more podcasts and audiobooks when I'm in that time. So already I feel like I'm able to reframe the way I perceive perceive free time in a different way. I'm able to make it more useful and not necessarily have it be work, you know. So I really now look forward to this 30-minute drive I have to and from the gym, because that's kind of like my audiobook time or my podcast time, when I can feel like I'm working at bettering myself, at bettering my knowledge, and just kind of relax and enjoy listening to literature in a way that I wasn't allowing myself or wasn't making time to do in the past. So I really feel like that's a time, you know, it's a time when I turn off my phone, I don't take calls when I'm in the car now. I really just kind of focus on this time to better myself, or I listen to podcasts, you know, and so I feel like that's now time that I've reclaimed, and that's 10 hours a week for me already right there. Um, and so the time, you know, again, I think there are people who can have time to work out in the morning. If they're a morning person, you know, they can find time. You also don't have to work out all at once too. You can really find time to get to the gym and do some mobility in the morning to get your day started, to put you in the right frame of mind. If you have time at lunch, do some heavy lifting and really kind of start building that in, you know. So I think it's something too that people, and I think it doesn't also have to be gym oriented. You know, people talk about this, oh, it's so expensive. Well, Planet Fitness is $10 a month. It's always been $10 a month. And there are people at my gym there's one guy who's a trainer that I work out with, and he, you know, really mostly does a lot of kind of dumbbell and body weight stuff, but has an amazing physique. And he said, he was like, why should I pay all this money to go to these fancy, expensive gyms when really everything that I need to accomplish, I can accomplish here for $10 a month? And so I feel like if you want to, if that's your only excuse, you don't have to belong to a premium gym with saunas and massages and all of this stuff. Like, you can do this at home if you really say, okay, I really can't fit this $10 a month into my budget. But if you can, you know, something like that has worked great for me, because I was paying $150 a month to do CrossFit and working out less than I am now. I was working out less because I was constantly sore and constantly in recovery and having so much anxiety about how much kind of effort or how much pain or how much, I don't know, how much exertion I was going to have to do CrossFit. And I just felt like it was this real struggle and of balance for, is this worth the amount of time? You know, this is really only 60 minutes. And I felt like I wasn't getting enough out of that time that I wanted, or what I wanted in particular out of that time. And so, yeah, I don't know. I went on vacation to South America for 10 days and I worked out my whole workout schedule. I may have missed like one workout in that whole time, but I made it a priority. I made it a priority to look and see what the fitness facilities were at the hotels that I was staying in. And fortunately, they were really good. But if they weren't really good, I also made a point of looking up where the nearest gyms were and what those reviews were. Could I drop in, you know, that were near the places where I was staying? And I was in South America, but it was fine. Like, and, you know, even over the holidays for Thanksgiving, we went and visited my in-laws, and I was able to make time to go and work out for 90 minutes without feeling like I was imposing on, that it was in any way interfering with my vacation or my family time or any of that. Like, it was really doable. And also I have family that was encouraging of that. And, you know, my husband was like, wow, I'm really impressed that you went and worked out the day before Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving morning, because you wouldn't have done that in the past. You would have slept in or blown it off. But I felt like, if this is who I'm going to be, then this is what I need to do. And so I just need to keep doing that to be who I really, and who I want to be, you know, both physically and spiritually and emotionally. And, you know, so I feel like it is more than just a habit. It has to become your personal culture. And then that starts attracting people who are like-minded in that culture too. I mean, I feel like I now have, my group of friends has shifted, and not changed, but shifted in a way where they're encouraging my good behavior, they're encouraging my efforts, they're encouraging my nutrition just by virtue of living with me. My husband has now lost 25 pounds, and put him um, in a better position with his physician as far as his heart health, his cholesterol. He doesn't have to have knee replacement. All of the stuff that just by virtue of him being proximate and participating in my well-being has really benefited him as well. Um, I had a group of friends and colleagues that we were always kind of focused on, hey, let's go out for a cocktail, or, we always had a flask of whiskey with us wherever we went. And so I've really made the biggest, I think, movement as far as away from alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
not in a meaningful way for me. So I was definitely a heavy drinker, and now I really rarely drink. If I do, it's kind of in a very ceremonial, or like a New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve or something like that I'll have a glass of wine. I don't want to be that person who just is like, oh no, I don't do that.
That's me.
It's not, yeah, they can't do it, so yeah, but again, that's your journey. It's not for me to place any kind of cultural value on whether you abstain or not. People abstain from alcohol for a number of different reasons, for as many different reasons as people drink alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do particularly find now that I've removed that element, that element from the equation, that I feel um, the negative result of alcohol in a much different way than I did before. I really do feel, poor digestion, poor sleep. I wake up feeling with inflammation in my hands and my joints. It feels toxic to me now. I mean, it is poison, and it feels toxic to me in a way that it didn't before, because I was in social situations and I was just accustomed to it, of what that felt like. I just thought, oh, well, this is what it feels like to be old, or this is what it feels like to wake up hungover 2 or 3 times a week. And I don't do that now. I don't have to do that, because that's part of this self-reflection part of the of the program and of my fitness journey too. Is like, oh, well, what was that medicating? And why am I doing that? So yeah, it's been a fascinating part of the equation for me, the alcohol in particular, because it was such um, an integral part of being a performer, of being an actor, of being, so it's part of this whole, it's a big part of a lot of people in the gay community too, not to pigeonhole that, but, it's definitely like, oh, let's go have brunch, let's go have mimosas on Sunday, let's go have, whatever. And so I feel like I've been able to move myself out of that cycle of constantly reinforcing and joking about alcohol, and encouraging my friends about alcohol in a way that isn't healthy for them, because it wasn't healthy for me. And now I'm finding those a lot of those friends are now encouraging me and are supportive of me, because they see I look different, they see that I feel differently, that I'm happier, that I'm more confident in a way I wasn't before. So was an interesting part of the equation, and I'm still struggling with the nutrition part, but it's still a work in progress. So
Well, you mentioned like a few good topics. One of them was I find like one of the biggest challenges a lot of people have is they kind of they don't select like an appropriate like workout vehicle to attain their goals. Like a lot of people, I would say, fall into the category. I might be projecting a little bit here simply because I just deal with people in this category. I happen to, but they just, for the most part, they have like sedentary jobs. And what they're looking for from their health and fitness journey is, they just want to look better, feel better, and probably don't want to be in pain 24/7, and attain that without actually putting a lot of wear and tear on their body. And I found what worked really well to basically be injury free, to develop like a very aesthetically appealing body with a really good ratio of lean muscle mass to body fat, meaning relatively low body fat, but still in a healthy level, meaning 10 to 12%, somewhere around there, and the rest of it being lean mass is mostly like um, aesthetic type workouts, which is what I had you doing. So can
Hmm.
you kind of shine light on your experience with, the aesthetic approach to developing your physique in the gym versus kind of something that's more like hardcore and impactful on the body, like CrossFit or boot camps or stuff of that sort?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like because I had done like P90X, which really is kind of a boot camp style, or Insanity, and then done CrossFit and Spartan racing. So it was always this kind of like really intense, and almost, in CrossFit, I felt like I was almost like that pain was like one of the prerequisites for participation in it. It's like, if you're not nauseous by the end of your workout, if you haven't dry heaved after this particular part of the workout, well, like you're not trying hard enough. And so I constantly felt under pressure to really push myself, so hard that again I wasn't getting the results I wanted, because then I couldn't participate again. Like I would push myself so hard that I would have to take the next day off, or the next 2 days off until I felt well enough to go work out again. And it's like, well, that's not functional in any way. There's no way you can build a sense of routine and habit around recovery from fitness. It's like, well, it's not sustainable in any way. And so I feel like you were so mindful of what my particular long-term injuries were. I have a bad shoulder that I've had since I was 20 years old. And I had some elbow, just a tennis elbow from basically doing lots of really high impact kinetic workouts, doing CrossFit. And so, or doing, I mean, just that was the style of working out that I knew. And so that's what I was doing. And so those have really kind of resolved themselves because we've taken this bodybuilding aesthetic approach to my fitness. And now, in some ways, I feel like I'm now in a place where I'm able to um, put a little bit more of that focus on things I'd never thought about before, like time under tension. I had never really focused on, I had done tempo work with Olympic lifting and CrossFit before because I had a lifting coach, but had never really focused on time under tension as a daily part of my focus and working out. What does it mean to that mind muscle connection too, to really think very intentionally um, about what is this movement, what muscles am I focusing on, how am I focusing on that, how am I moving the weight, am I moving it symmetrically, am I moving it with good technique, am I moving the right amount of weight? And so I think that's something I hadn't really had the time to focus on because I'm also not under a clock. And so with a lot of that um, CrossFit style workouts, you're under very strict clock, or Orange Theory or things like that, that you don't have time to really slow down. And so I feel like that element of pace, and I think we had talked at one point about even just my curation of my workout with my music that I listen to,
Mhm.
is able to put me in a space where I can focus on tempo. And so I've now, at this point, after 7, 8 months, curated playlists that I know there's specific playlists for specific days that are going to kind of set me up at the right tempo. I know there's specific songs or specific compositions that I'm like, this song is perfect for doing, lifts, or this song is perfect for doing presses because it's the right tempo for what I'm kind of keeping. So I'm able to kind of bring in that sense of rhythm and musicality into my workouts in a way that I wasn't before. But I feel like that ability to concentrate on, especially, yeah, this tempo, time under tension, um, has given me the opportunity to maximize the time that I'm at the gym. And so I do take a little bit longer now to work out, but because I'm also being much more thoughtful in how I'm moving. And I've been really pleased. I've gotten compliments from a couple of people. One of the guys I talked about that is a fitness trainer. He was like, I never would have guessed that you were 52. He was like, you really look like you're in your 30s. And he was like, and you move with, he was like, I really like the energy you bring when I watch you working out. He was like, you look very focused. He was like, you move with intention. Um, and so there's been a couple of, you know, younger guys who've asked for help. There's this couple of high school kids that are always trying really hard and always want to kind of observe what I'm doing or ask. You know, and one of the things I told him was like, set your intention, you know, really think about what is this movement? How is this movement? Practice it without weight first. Really, you know, how do you want to move? And then start adding weight to it, you know. And then I would rather see someone start with 10-pound bicep curls than these people who are just flailing around with, you know, ego lifting 50-pound barbells or dumbbells. I'm like, that's not effective
Mm-hmm.
at all. You know, if you set your mindset, for me, I feel like that's been a big mind changer. And so the working out part, the actual workout has become much more kind of meditative
Mm-hmm.
for me in a way that it never was before. And that's a huge paradigm shift for me as far as that. I enjoy it in a way that I never thought, you know, but it is frustrating to see people who are clearly obese and clearly think, and I see them at the gym 4 or 5 times a week, and the only thing I ever see them do is walking on a treadmill, holding on, leaning back, and just walking. You know, it's like, well, that's not going to accomplish much. You know, it's at least they're there, but sometimes I just wish I could ask them, like, what is your goal? Like, what are you trying to do? Because I see you here week after week after week, and they're still obese, or they're still, you know, what is it about their story that they need to change? You know, is it like, are they there to lose weight, or are they really just there to like block out everything else the rest of their day, and that's their me time? Like, that's fine if that's what they want to accomplish, but if they're there to accomplish fat loss, that's probably not the way to do it. And if they're still eating like they ate before, but just saying, oh, well, I treadmill 5 days a week, well, okay. But what else are they doing in the whole rest of their life? So like you've said, this one, you know, fixing one element doesn't fix the system. So putting new tires on an old car isn't going to make it go any faster. It's just, you know, it's one element. So yeah. And so I think um, that's what's been helpful for me, is to look at, and I think with your, you know, with your onboard survey, you know, I felt like you elicited from me a thoughtfulness about, okay, well, what am I doing as far as fitness now? And what works about that, and what skills can I transfer to a new way of thinking about this journey, you know? And so I feel like I had a great foundation from good CrossFit coaching. It's just not the vehicle that I chose to stay with. It definitely moved me on my journey from point A to point B, but it's not the vehicle that's going to take me the rest of my life. And I feel like I have enough skills that if I wanted to, if I was traveling and someone invited me to drop in for a CrossFit class, like I would totally enjoy doing that. But it's not something that I feel like that's going to be the vehicle that I rely on. But again, neither is weightlifting isn't the only vehicle, or cardio isn't the only vehicle that I'm going to rely on. So I feel like it's about getting the right tools in your toolbox and figuring out what works best for you.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Yeah, and you uncovered a lot there. I mean, just like you mentioned, just being very mindful and focused during your workout, and just having that really solid mind muscle connection, really being the zone while you're working out. I found that changing a person's perspective from like focusing on lifting the weight, instead of doing that, having them focus more on voluntarily contracting the targeted muscle group and using the external weight to facilitate that contraction that's already they're voluntarily doing, to be just great for overall results. I mean, the muscle changes visually a lot more as well, and just overall muscle prevention, because typically you're using kind of like a slower tempo, so you're also not lifting as heavy. And then also you just have to be so focused. It's kind of tough to cause injury when you're just so focused, especially like we went over many times, kind of eliminating the micro movements from your lifts. The typical one on the bench press, when you're benching and you kind of start distorting your shoulder position and your body in general, just to finish that last rep. Kind of the importance of avoiding that, and the importance of kind of keeping the tension in the targeted muscle group the entire set, from start to finish, every single millimeter of the way. I found that just with clients or with myself in general, you even pretty much like eliminate those like kind of random strains you might get from time to time, maybe not even injury, but just that kind of like muscle pull that lasts for a few days. Even those kind of disappear. I never see those happening. Anyone training with that kind of philosophy of creating that voluntary contraction, keeping that tension in the targeted muscle the entire way, and never allowing it to kind of go into your joints. Because if you're feeling it in your joints, that's already the tension is already lost from the muscle. Of course, there's going to be some tension nonetheless. Then it might require the person to focus like a little bit more heavily, which goes back into they got to sleep well then, which goes back into they got to manage their central nervous system well. I mean, there's so many dimensions that that a person has to attend to all at once to be able to achieve their goals, which kind of ties into, like you said, running into 95% of the people you probably see in the gym that actually go to the gym and spend a lot of time there. They're pretty much there every day you're there, probably for as long as you're there. And you see them month after month, year after year, and they look the same, or even some of them even look worse. And of course, some of them may be there just to kind of check it in, but I'm pretty sure a lot of them, at least initially, had the motivation of really creating real change. But unfortunately, like what I found, at least from my observation, is they typically rely on like one dimension to kind of solve the problem of another. So for example, they would just rely on just eating well, or just working out, or just eating and working out well, which is definitely, and then also there's the whole entire like, they probably don't even know how to work out well, nor do they even know. They think like a fad diet is eating well, or just eating less is what good diet is all about, or just doing whatever popular diet, ABC, keto, fasting, paleo 360 or 30, whatever they freaking cockroach diet, whatever is out there these days, the juice diet. And just, dude, there's so much more to nutrition than that. And at the end of the day, it's like, trendy diets don't work because each individual is different. Nature is a novelty generator, and each person's digestive system is different. Your goals are different. Your current base metabolism is different. This person is trying to gain weight. This person is trying to lose weight. This person is trying to lose weight as well, but he has a different digestive system than this other person. I mean, dude, there's so many variables to consider, and a fad diet kind of really just like keto, like really boxes you in. Just do this. And the reason it's alluring is because there's no thinking involved. And there's a dad figure kind of telling you what to do, like, oh, just do this and you'll have salvation. You know what I mean? You'll have what you're looking for. And sure, you may have some short-term results here and there. You may actually lose whatever the 20, 30 pounds you're trying to lose. But I guarantee you, 98% of those people will regain all their weight within 2 to 3 years, almost guaranteed, and be back to exactly where they started. Because once again, they're trying to collapse like the dimension, and oftentimes, like we mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, it's most often a belief system that leads to behavior patterns that lead to that weight gain that are independent of nutrition. Because, dude, with the internet, you want any answers, go to pubmed.gov, find any study on anything health related right there. All the answers are there. Why are 9 out of 10 Americans metabolically unhealthy right now? It's clearly not an information problem. at this point.
Right. Yeah. And we look at those, external forces just from nutrition alone of processed food, of industrially farmed food, and so yeah, we've made all of this really nutritionally, neutral or nutritionally poor food so inexpensive and so available that it is easy to eat like crap, but it is just as easy to eat whole food, good food. And so that's something that I really feel like that's something that I learned having growing up in Europe was this kind of just cultural mindset of like shopping for produce every day, going to the market every day or every other day. And that's something that I was able to do even, as recently as a few years ago in Prague. I lived across the street from a market and the grocery store. And so I was able to kind of go and shop daily as I needed. And I can do that a little bit now. And so I feel like, I really hesitate to call it a diet. People ask me like, "Oh, what's your diet?" And I'm like, I refuse to call it a diet. It's a nutritional
You
strategy.
should call it,
I feel like,
sorry to interrupt. You should just call it eating like a human being.
yeah, like this
Hum-
is how we're designed to eat.
Yeah, I love how like a
Eat.
human being living like one is a diet now. I'm like, no, man, that's just how you normally
It,
eat. That's how a person has basically lived for like literally 99% of the 200,000 years that the Homo
yeah.
sapien has been.
At what point in the timeline did processed food come into the equation? Like
Yeah,
just last blink, So it's like that's not who we are as a species. That's not who we are. We're not designed to eat processed food or processed sugar or processed, grains and all of this stuff that's like, ground down and distilled um to its basic elements that become toxic. We eat so much. I mean, that's why in the past, I mean, we look at, well, oh, well, sugar and salt and were used as currency. Well, because they were rare and hard to manufacture and hard to find, and not everyone had sugar. You could get honey, which is way healthier than cane sugar. So we look at what the access we have to these things, and why, and then we wonder why, like, we're obese. We wonder why we're all, having, I mean, really intense obesity, heart troubles, diabetes, all these things. Like we've made all of this kind of toxic, I wouldn't even call it food stuffs so accessible. It's food like. And so that's, I think about that too. When I'm in the grocery store, I look at things or I look at other people, I judge other people's shopping carts and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of food stuff and no real food, where, and then I'll look at my basket and it's like 80%, 90%, produce. It's just vegetables, a little bit of fruit and a bunch of meat. Like that's it. I'm really not buying. I'm trying to think of what, I don't know, the last few times I went shopping, if I bought anything that was processed, and I haven't, I just don't. So, um, but I've eaten like that before, but I was eating a lot of like, especially just starchy vegetables. I was eating a lot of like potatoes and sweet potatoes and, I definitely was eating a lot of dairy. I was eating a lot of cheese and I still eat some cheese, but I just don't eat it. I won't eat a half a brick of, of cheddar. I might eat an ounce. And so I'm looking at not calorie counting, but looking at just what our portion sizes are too. Living in Europe, portion sizes are easily a half or a third of what they are here when you go to a restaurant and you order an entree. Like it is a serving. It's not meant to like, it's not a 2,000 calorie, entree. It's a 500 calorie entree. So I think, that's something that I find I'm just more mindful of, not particularly calorie counting. And then also, where are these just like real phantom carbs and phantom calories coming from? For me, I think the big thing is like cream and sugar in my coffee is a huge phantom calorie. Salad dressing, huge, like, they serve you these little bucket of dressing with your salad, and that's like 150 calories, 200 calories right there. So
Mhm.
eliminating how much oil, cooking oil, olive oil, because I was like, oh, well, I only use olive oil, but that's so calorie dense, and it's not providing me any functional, it's not fueling me in any particular way, So I might cook with a teaspoon of olive oil in order to keep meat from sticking or something, but I'm not using it as a flavor element or as something that's going to fill me up, not as a substitute, but as a supplement. And so, it's kind of the same thing. You were talking about people want these quick fixes. And so then you see a lot of these guys who are just like, loading up on supplements. And it's like, think about what that word is a supplement to a good nutritional strategy. It's not a substitute for a good nutritional strategy. And so I really find the nutritional supplements that I take are, the ones that you've recommended, but are sustainably derived, are whole food. They're not kind of mass manufactured, so eating things like bone broth or eating things like collagen as a supplement, um, or like the paleo protein, it's this organically derived whey protein. Like, I feel like those are real things that have one ingredient in them. I feel okay about supplementing my nutritional strategy with those things, not as a substitute, So.
Yeah, and then also like a few things you mentioned that are important too is kind of like this is actually going back to the gym membership thing, but it also ties into the nutritious food being more expensive. If you actually count the total cost of per ounce of processed food versus the whole food, like uh, shit, I haven't had them so long, I forgot the name of them. Fries. Oh yeah, fries. So fries as compared to the potato, or I'm sorry, what are those fried chips called that they make out of potatoes? Potato chips. See, that's potato proof that I haven't eaten it in like freaking decades because I even forgot what it's called. If you count the, per ounce of food for potato chips versus the potatoes made out of, you'll see it's probably like at least like a 400 or 500% markup in terms of like per ounce of food you actually get from that. And honestly, like Americans, um, and no absolutes here. There are some very, 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 very minor exceptions, but the average American spends like $8,000 to $16,000 on non-essential expenses every year. Every year, non-essential expenses being defined as, alcohol, eating out with their coworkers, that new iPhone, subscription services,
Starbucks every day.
whatever, jeans, maybe recreational drugs or cigarettes or whatever, you know what I mean? And I'm not even counting travel. If you throw travel in there and also like the medical expenses from poor lifestyle choices, I mean, it could be anywhere from, like 12 to like $25,000 a year. How much does a 2,000 calorie organic diet cost roughly per year? It's around like 4,500 to $5,000 for 2,000 calories. Obviously, some people are eating more than that, etc. But so it might be a bit more. But okay, like you don't have $4,500, but you do have $8,000 to $16,000 to spend on bullshit that, like, for the most part, people just buy to numb themselves out from lifestyle they don't want anyways. You know what I mean? If they kind of evaluate that in detail, they'll see the silliness in their spending and that really it's not adding any value to their life long term outside of maybe some sugar highs at best. And that's really about it. And once again, it is the weekend. I know many of you aren't going to be honest with yourself, but for the very few that are, just sit down, look over your expenses, really calculate like every single penny, and you will see uh, over the year span, it ends up adding up to about like $8,000 to $16,000 a year. And I know one time you did mention how much money you guys were saving by not by dying down on like wine and maybe eating. I forgot exactly. Yeah, talk about that in terms of, because oftentimes people think like, oh, being healthy is expensive, but really being unhealthy, if you actually count the direct financial cost and indirect cost, it's actually far greater than being healthy. And and people are spending far more money just being miserable and sick than they are being mentally and physically well. Can you touch on like how much money you possibly saved by
I
changing?
mean, I would say between my husband and I mean, we were easily spending, I don't know, $200 to $300 a month just on liquor, which doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, a bottle of whiskey is $50, you know, because I didn't drink cheap liquor. But again, that's again the kind of a cultural hashtag too. It's like, oh well, I only drink top shelf, or I only blah blah blah. Like it's all still not healthy, whatever, you know. So, but you know, and then how much money was I spending on prescription medications? And then how much money, you know, I was spending when I would go out with friends, and this is part of that cultural element too, where people are like, oh, well, let's meet up for a beer. Okay, well, you know, well, 3 or 4 beers later, well, that's 25, 30, $40. By the time you have a meal, it's $50 just to hang out and drink alcohol and eat whatever food truck is providing for you, you know. And so I think my husband noticed, and we noticed, you know, for sure that my grocery spending was on the upswing, but in general, we were spending less money per month because we were cutting out these non-essentials like, you know, excessive amounts of alcohol. I've never been a Starbucks fan, but I have a niece who, you know, she posts every time she goes to Starbucks 2 or 3 times a day. And I can't even imagine how much money that is to spend. If you're spending $10, if you're spending $30 a day at Starbucks, well, that's gym memberships, or that's, you know, that's like 3 pounds of sirloin. That's, you know, to think of it that way, how many, you know, how much produce can you buy with $30 a day, you know? But to say, oh, well, you know, that's $200 a week. That's, you know, crazy to think I'm spending 150 bucks a week on coffee. You know, it's like, well, I would be more impressed if you know, had a French press at your desk and made your own coffee for 30 cents a cup. Like, that's impressive to me. So I just feel like there's things like that that we can evaluate. So it is about, you know, taking this inventory. It's really a life inventory, you know, an inventory of how I spend my time, how I spend my money, what do I buy, how am I nourishing myself, how much money am I spending on so-called recreation. You know, yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. It's not about sacrificing anything in order to accomplish these goals. It's just about realigning what your priorities are, and looking really clearly. It's also the mind shift too, where someone really might say, I never even thought about how much I spent on coffee. You know, like, okay, well, and then what is it about that coffee that you feel like is so important to you? Is it that you need all of that caffeine because you're working so hard and you're so busy and you're so stressed, and or is it because you're so addicted to the sugar that comes in all of these, you know, frappuccinos and whatever. I don't even know what they are because I don't drink that stuff. So, you know, what is it about that habit? You know, so I would say a Starbucks addiction is just as dangerous as an alcohol addiction in a lot of ways. Like, it's still pumping all of this sugar and caffeine into your system. Why are you doing that? What is it about the Starbucks fix that you feel like is valuable to you socially, or valuable to you physically or emotionally, or what is it about that? You know, so I think we can apply that strategy to everything that we do. You know, if we say, oh, I could never do this program because I love bread too much. What does that even mean? Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what does it say about
I don't
you,
know
about your
that.
life,
Yeah.
about your priorities? You know, yeah, like, oh, I could never do that because I love bread and beer. You know, well, yeah, that's pathetic. So, I love bread and beer too, but I also love not having a heart attack and being alive. And I also love looking great. You know, I feel like I look great. I feel like I'm, you know, physically in the best shape of my life. I've never been this healthy ever. And I'm 52, you
Yeah, and that you feel like every single second of the day,
know?
you know? Like when you have that bread or whatever, you might feel it for like 2 seconds, but then the taste buds go away and then like what are you left with? You know what I mean? You're down whatever, $10 or how much ever that bread costs at the restaurant. And then also you're with the amount of activity people have in their day, they're definitely not burning off anything. Even people get confused like, oh, I'm going to work this out or work this off. But it's like, dude, like even if you work out with like maximum intensity, you're burning like 400 calories a workout. And no one is working out with that kind of intensity because everyone is in a heightened state of adrenal fatigue anyways. I mean, they might think it's intense, but it's not. It's just they have such low energy. Any amount of exertion seems like it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the calories they're burning is so low. And then typically their base metabolism is very poor too, because they're just dysfunctional in so many different ways in their life. Their muscle mass is typically very low. Their toxic load from buying non-organic food, drinking that coffee that's definitely not organic, grown with God knows how many synthetic biocides that are making it into that cup of coffee, and then it's served to you in plastic, and then
Mm-hmm.
those organic chemicals ooze in there, and then once those chemicals are actually heated up, or a lot of synthetic chemicals are heated, actually become even more potent, or even more like new chemicals are created in a heated state.
Yeah.
And then you're drinking that every day, and then obviously your body prioritizes this visceral tissue over all else. So once the toxicity builds up enough, your body will start creating more fat stores to get those toxins away from all those organs and store it in the periphery, at least to give it some kind of chance of survival. And then all of a sudden your body fat is through the roof. Obviously there still needs to be a caloric surplus, which pretty much all people are in, because you can't gain body fat without being in a consistent caloric surplus. And that's like the silliest thing in the world for people that I hear them say sometimes, like, oh, I'm eating like 0 calories, but I'm gaining weight. Oh, you are? That's very interesting. Well, guess what? Then you don't have to worry about getting lost in the forest without any food. In fact, you don't even have to worry about even buying food. Imagine how much money and time that would save you. So just stop doing that if you're not burning, if your body is actually not burning any calories. And a lot of people also say like, oh, it's my genetics or my thyroid or my hormones. Yeah, I mean, that might affect your base metabolism and how many calories you burn a little bit, but it's not going to shut it down to zero. There's still a
Right.
caloric that you could attain. And then also long term, you want to attend to these, ask deeper questions. Why are my hormones all messed up? Why is my thyroid all messed up? Why am I having issue ABC? Like why? And like literally, now once again, no absolutes. There are very rare exceptions. I'm talking about one in a few thousand. It really is their genetics, like one in a few thousand. The rest of the time I find, especially through 15 years of observation, human behavior in regards to this topic, is literally they're just doing it to themselves through their behavior choices, and their belief system has some type of pathology to it that are leading to all these problems, which is a good thing. Because like I always say, if you're doing it to yourself, like, dude, you can stop doing it anytime. And if you need help, you could become your own mechanic, but start investing a lot of time in reading books, taking courses, start with 2 or 3 books a month. Just reading 20 pages every night before you go to bed not only will help you have more restful sleep, but could also help you polish off 2 books a month, 2 average-sized books a month, and that's 24 books a year. Imagine how much quality that could bring you getting the knowledge of all those authors per year versus watching some stupid Netflix series or whatever. Like, come on. I mean, those things are okay to do too, but you don't want to just kind of get in a pattern of going to work, then coming home, you're watching those series for like 5 to 10 hours while drinking and eating junk food, and then going to sleep, and then repeating that cycle and wondering why you're not attracting great partners, wondering why you're stuck in the job you're stuck in, or in patterns of life you're stuck in. I'm like, well, to attract better, you got to become better yourself. You attract the type of energy you put out. And just at the end of the day, if you're very sick, you're very miserable and stuff of this sort, just, you're not going to attract the best people.
Yeah, that's what you're presenting. That's what you're reflecting. And then if you're just lying to yourself and saying, like you were saying about excuses, and I feel like that was part of of the program with you that I found really beneficial was the weekly check-in, because I felt like there was an accountability to someone else, not just myself. And I knew also that you weren't really going to tolerate any bullshit excuses either. So I really couldn't say like, I don't know why this happened. Like, I really felt like I was in a position to say like, I had a hard week and I fucked this up and I ate terribly this week. And there may be circumstances that contributed to it, but it's not a matter of like, of me just saying like, I don't know. I mean, I did have some medication changes that affected my overall hydration and digestive health, but not in a way that was so drastic that it threw me off the rails. But I also felt like when I had a hard week, I felt like I could also very comfortably, admit that to you too, and say like, yeah, I drank alcohol, or I ate a bunch of baked goods at Christmas. Like, I just did. So it's been interesting. Just yesterday and today, I was going over my weight results kind of over the whole process of the program, and I really peaked, I think, in mid-October. I was down to 176. So that was a loss of 27 pounds, 28 pounds. And so, since October, I've been averaging right around 179, 180, 179, 180, and it's just been fluctuating. But I think a lot of that too was
Hey,
a
Rob.
behavioral fit. Yeah.
Terribly sorry to interrupt you. So my phone is running out of batteries.
Uh-oh.
Can you keep talking to the audience, and I'm going to go run and get a plug. I'll be back in like literally like 5 seconds. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Just kind
But
of give tips to the audience of like exactly like what worked for you. Okay. I'll be back in a
yeah,
second. Apologies.
I feel like right now, you know, trying to get back to look at the beginning of the program when I was having a lot of weight loss very quickly and dramatically. So I feel like I've been kind of going back through the program, which is now a resource that I have. I now have this whole catalog of information that you've shared with me. So I have a nutritional strategy. I have my workouts. I have other resource information, both instructional videos and podcasts. So it is a library of knowledge and information that I can go back to and keep referring to, and going back and referencing it is also helping me shift my mindset back to where I feel like, okay, yeah, this was what was working for me at the time. So I've been able to look at my weight loss averages and say, oh, this was a particularly good month for me. What was I doing then? What was I eating then? And so keeping that inventory of my meals and nutrition has helped me use that information as a resource too. But yeah, no, I was just saying that having the whole catalog of information is still continuing to be a good reference for me to go back and look at weight loss, look at the meal plan section, look at weekly averages. And you would say, if I had a really good week, you'd be like, okay, cut and paste. Like, what did you do? How did you eat? What worked for you this time? And then how can we repeat that? And so now, 6, 7, 8 months later, I can still go back and look at all of this catalog of information and say, oh, this is what I was doing then. This is the workouts I was doing. This is the meals that I was using. And this is how much weight I was losing. How can I recreate this now? And so, yeah, so it's now this catalog of information that I have as a resource for me. It's great tools in my toolbox.
Yeah, I find a lot of people, especially in the fat loss industry, kind of really demonize taking your weight every single day. But honestly, I've had like literally nothing but success with it. And I think one of the reasons they demonize that is because a lot of programs just simply don't work. So it kind of discourages the person when they don't see the weight changing that much from day to day. That could be one thing. But I've just seen great results with getting people to take their weight first thing in the morning on an empty stomach and kind of making a procedure of that, and then also tracking it. Could be on a journal. It could be preferably like in an Excel chart, because I find that sometimes with journals you lose it. But if you do it with like Google Docs, for example, it's like just always in the cloud and you could access it. Even if you kind of spaced out on terms of where it is, it's just not going to really get lost. But it works wonders because, one, if you do it first thing in the morning, it kind of reminds you of what you're trying to accomplish. You know, it kind of sets it at the top of mind in the sense that I'm on this fat loss journey, or I'm on this muscle gain journey. Or you could even do this with anything, like with even like gut health. You could write like how your gut feels in the morning or during the day, or if you have depression, anxiety, whatever, literally anything, it would work well. And it also, more importantly, gives you that instant objective feedback. So with weight, it's easier to describe than the other symptoms. But for example, you can go like, let's say you had consecutive, 10 days of losing weight gradually. And then all of a sudden on the 11th day, it bumps up quite a bit. You see that in the morning, you're like, oh, I wonder what happened, Well, let me think. Oh, that's right. I went to lunch with my friend and, I meant to do this, but I had like 2 drinks, you know what I mean? I didn't mean to do that. And I can kind of see how this weight is affecting, or how those behaviors are affecting my weight. And that'll help you be more consciously aware of, A, you are doing it to yourself through your behaviors and your choices, but B, also the degree of how those behaviors and choices affect your weight in that case, or depression or anxiety or whatever, and stuff of that sort. So people do demonize it quite a bit, but honestly, I've just seen it work wonders with males, females, gaining weight, losing weight, other priorities as well. So I don't know. I think moreover, it's like also like not what you do, but how you do it oftentimes, So the way I've been applying it at least has worked great for me. And I've never had anyone complain about like taking their weight daily or weekly and then seeing their weekly averages going down and them looking better week after week. If anything,
Yeah.
it reinforces that they're doing the right stuff. And then they're like, okay, I know what to do. Because after like a week's worth of entries, you're like, you could just copy and paste oftentimes, You're like, what worked for this week? Okay, I'll just copy and paste for this week. Those same exact behavior patterns, and maybe kind of tinker a little bit to improve on them over time if needed, and stuff of that sort. So,
Yeah, I find that the daily weighing wasn't. Sometimes I would definitely fall into the trap of focusing so much on what that daily number was, as opposed to what the weekly average was. And that's where like you were saying, I found the most satisfaction from looking at the weekly averages, and then having enough data to look at monthly averages. So that's where I know in this whole program that September, October were my most successful. Like, what was it about that time? Where was I as far as work? Where was I as far as nutritional strategies and stuff like that? What was working best. And so I've been able to also de-emphasize that daily weigh-in as like make or break. Because so there were times definitely in the process where I felt like the daily weigh-ins were really discouraging because I was seeing numbers bump up, and then but then also you have people who they're literally offering you excuses. They're like, oh, you're just building muscle and losing fat at the same time, and that's why you're gaining weight. And it's like, well, I mean, and you've addressed that a couple of times, where people, and they just, so then it's almost like they're reinforcing your bad news by saying like, oh, it's really fine, you're just building muscle and losing fat at the same time, that's why you're gaining weight. But I really feel like if I gain it's one thing to gain a quarter of a pound or a half a pound in a week, but there was one week where I really was trending like a pound over, a pound and a half over. And I'm like, I know I'm not eating, 5,000 calories a day or more. What is this coming from? So I think all of those metrics are just giving us more information and more tools to figure out like, what is this? Why is this happening? But yeah, I knew a lot of people who were like, oh no, I never weigh myself. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, that's part of it, but it's important. It can be an important tool if you use it as a tool and not the goal. Um, so yeah, it's just one piece of empirical information, but it's not the whole story. So I think to focus on that one piece of empirical information isn't necessarily helpful, you know? So, but yeah, I found the weekly averages to be the most kind of helpful part of that process of the weighing in. And you're able to look at those trends too and say, oh, well, really, actually, if you look over the past month, like you've really actually lost weight, as opposed to focusing on, oh, I've gained weight this 1 week, you know, where really I might have lost 3 pounds over a month, you know.
Yeah,
So,
it's tricky. Day to days are important for sure because of that instant feedback, but because of fluid fluctuations, you know, like sometimes maybe you might be a little bit constipated one day versus another day, or maybe you kind of got held up at work and you ate a meal really late one day versus another day you usually finish around like 5 p.m., you know, your last meal or something like that. That's all going to affect your day-to-day weigh-ins. But when you do kind of calculate your weekly average, like you mentioned, it's more of a representation of the trends you're going in. So I would
mhm,
focus on obviously telling the person that you need to focus on your weekly average as the really true tale sign of if you're progressing in the right direction. And a great combination, which I would recommend people do, and anyone can do this, is simply like once a month, take your pictures from the front, side, and back, you know, without a shirt, and do that like every single 4 weeks and kind of crop them together and see it side by side. That's also another great supplement to tracking your weekly averages and your monthly average weights and stuff of that sort. Find both of those combined work really well on encouraging the person and also giving them feedback on if something's working or not working. Because
mhm,
people that don't track, they don't know what's causing what. You ask them like, "Oh, you lost like whatever that month. What did you do?" "Oh, I don't know." You know, like how
mhm,
you know what I mean? Unless you track it. So tracking is really important. There are more ways to track than just those two, but those two are very minimalist. And what I found, um, they're just way more than enough that you need. You can get a DEXA scan done and invest money into stuff of that sort, but it's really not necessary. And then a lot of those kind of Bluetooth type watches, then you're getting all that EMF radiating through your body all day. So that's something to consider. Although sometimes it's maybe for a short period of time okay to use that for one rate or another. The calorie tracking apps, I mean, they're okay, but if you look up the data on PubMed.gov, they're fairly inaccurate, you know, but they're okay as just a very, very, very general
mhm,
reference point. So once again, the sure things that work, just take your weight first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, because that's representative of what your body actually weighs minus all the fluid and food you're going to take in during the day. What you weigh at night or in the middle of the day is fairly irrelevant. So I would just focus on that morning weigh-in. And then also just taking your pictures from the front, side, and back as well. That could be huge because oftentimes, sometimes, especially when you see your back and you're like at 20% body fat, you kind of don't notice it when you're looking at yourself. But when you see it in pictures, you're like, whoa,
yeah.
what the hell is that? You know? And it could be like a huge wake up call for the bulk majority of people I found. So,
For sure. You know, my spare tire that I had, you know, that back fat in my lower waist, like to see that shrink, you know, was a huge deal. And I noticed it for sure just in my chest. You know, I had a lot of just kind of fat. Um, and I considered myself, I thought I was looking pretty good, you know, in May. And I really, and then I see like even just a comparison from May to September, you know, just in 5 months, like is remarkable. And so then from, you know, from May until now, I feel like is also like a really remarkable transition. Just, but I also wanted it really badly too for myself. You know, I wanted it to prove to myself. I think um, when I first started P90X, there were people who were like, "You can't do that," and so I wanted to prove it to them that I could do it. And now I really wanted this for myself. I really wanted to have that aesthetic body that I always kind of thought was unattainable, and it's really not. And it was just in the last couple of days I really did kind of put together like it has been this 12-year journey. It's not like this was just this overnight thing that I was able to jump on your program and fix everything, you know. But it definitely took me farther faster than anything had up until this point, is the most effective vehicle that I had been in as far as my health journey up until this point, and yeah. So for me, I feel like I can't say enough about, how, just in general, how good I feel, and how good I look. And I still, again, like we've said, it's not a destination. It's not the end point of the program. It's just, I'm looking forward to continuing to lose a little bit more fat. I'm looking forward to now building more muscle in a way that's sustainable, that's healthy, that I'm not going to injure myself. And I'm also looking forward to being able to help other people too. I feel like I'm moving in a direction that you had mentioned, coaching, and it's something that I have thought about. And I feel like this is also reinforcing that desire to help other people be well and healthy. It's not about hiring a trainer. Like that's not it at all. I feel like it has been a program that has been very thoughtful and introspective, and an approach that would not have considered taking. It's very different. So yeah, thank you.
What would you say as like our closing statement? What would you say to, those the males getting into like their 40s or 50s that are still like, I'll do it tomorrow, like next month, when like Jupiter and all its moons align, then I'll make it happen, stuff of that sort. And they're just, like one excuse after another. And once again, those excuses are totally like the majority of the time just forms of escape from the person putting themselves first for one reason or another. But what would some tips you can give them to kind of fast track the process for them so they don't have to, you know, get on all those medical drugs or just wait for that kind of crisis in life to occur, like a heart attack or like a stroke, before they finally like take action?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the breaking point for me when I was 40 years old was, I was watching, I don't know, something, and had eaten like an entire bag of potato chips, like 5,000 calories in one sitting. And I really just was like, this is bullshit. Like, what am I doing? I have to fix this. No one is going to fix this for me. No. And so again, like this time, when I started in May, I just felt like I knew that I needed help. And I knew that reaching out to you, I just felt like it gave me enough reassurance, but it was what I needed. It was encouraging in a way that I felt like okay, I can do this. I can definitely do this. And then seeing results from some of your previous clients is what really, like, that's what sold me. I think it's one of your clients, John, who you said is in his 60s, like his before and after pictures in particular, because I saw his body type and his frame, and it was like, that's a very similar body type to me. I'm not very tall. I'm only like 5'8". So I feel like also seeing that, I was like, I really could see myself in that. And so that was another important part of, having clients take these pictures too. I felt like seeing your clients' results and their progress was so encouraging to me. Like, that's kind of what sold me on it. I was like, if this guy can have this happen in 6 months, like, I know I can do this. I have to be able to believe in myself enough to do it. And so I just did it. I had a long conversation with my husband and said, this is going to be a financial investment. It's going to be a time investment. It's going to be a big change in our diet and nutrition at first. And he was not on board with a lot of elements of it at first, but he said, whatever is going to help you. So I think too, having a sense of community or family support helped me. I know not everyone has that, but I feel like they can have that with you, and they can have that with this community online too, that there is a sense of encouragement and accountability. But I just had to just do it, to just kind of step up and trust the process. And it has worked. The process is continuing to evolve for me, and you've made it your whole lifestyle now. And so Um, and I think for some people, it might seem extreme, or to look at a nutrition program and be like, I could never eat like that, or I could never work out that much. And it's like, well, you can surprise yourself too. I think we're amazing creatures and have the capacity to achieve amazing things that aren't impossible or even particularly difficult. It's definitely work. I've worked very hard. I've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of time. I've invested money, but I feel like the results are far outweighing, all of these other negative things too. How many years have I bought on my life, avoiding heart attack or stroke or, being insulin dependent or having a cirrhotic liver, how much time have I bought for myself? So it is an investment in myself and I think it's been an investment in my career too. I feel like I look better, I sound better, I'm more mentally and emotionally focused on the work I'm doing because I'm physically in a better place, emotionally in a better place. So I feel like you're saying, I'm reflecting this outwardly, and now I'm getting like more work coming to me because I'm in a place where I'm able to receive that work too, and I'm in a place where my personal interpersonal interactions with my friends are more nourishing because that's what I'm reflecting outwards to. So I feel like it's this real balance and this real dialogue of just trusting yourself and committing to the process and to the program and trusting you. And I feel like I can't speak highly enough of what it's been like to have your support and encouragement. So it's about trust in yourself and believing you can do it.
What would you, last question is, this one is always interesting. If you had to go back, I don't know, let's say 13 years ago and you ran into yourself, like, do you feel, is there something you can tell yourself to kind of fast track the process?
Um,
Or do you think your old self will tell you just to kind of F off because they kind of know what they're doing and stuff of that sort, you know?
I don't know. At that point, I was really just like, yeah, at that point, 13 years ago, I was just fat and unhappy. At that point, I weighed 253 pounds. Um, but I think, uh, I don't know. I mean, for me in particular, I really feel like the alcohol part of the equation was the biggest part. And I had a CrossFit coach who said, like, we would do dry January every year. And he was like, I'm just telling you, I would, if you said you were never going to do CrossFit again, he was like, I would feel okay about that if you told me that you were never going to drink again, or limit your alcohol in a way that would, because I felt like it was just for me in particular, it was an element that was toxic to me physically. It was toxic to me socially. It was toxic financially. And so I feel like that's one of the things that I really just feel like I would probably tell myself. It's just like, dude, easy on the drinking. And I think, again, for everyone, it might be a different substance. It might be, PlayStation, or it might be, marijuana, or however much. And again, it's all about what are the toxic elements that we're feeding ourselves and surrounding ourselves with. And so I think that's something I would tell myself, and just that you could do it. I mean, I think 13 years ago, if I were to see what my body looks like now, I would be completely incredulous, because even in 8 months, there's guys at the gym that I saw when I first started working out, and I thought, God, these guys are like built. These guys look great. And I see them now, and I'm like, I think I look better than some of them, or I've made more gains than they've made, or that I'm, have more definition than they have now. And so I feel like, yeah, I feel like I would just, I don't know, I would have a hard time believing that I look like what I do now compared to what I did 13 years ago. So I think on one occasion I had sent you a picture of me when I was 40 years old or 39 years old. And I was like just big and fat. And I just wouldn't have believed. And this is the aesthetic that I wanted. I think it definitely elicits a different quality of attention from people. Some of it good, some of it not so good. I mean, and you obviously deal with that just as a community leader. on a daily basis, I'm sure, but it's still something that I think I would just have to have reassured myself that you can do this. Like if you believe in the longer process. But yeah, I think I've always been a little bit of a risk taker too, where I'm also interested in doing things that seem kind of out of character for me. So when I started doing, P90X, people were like, you can't do that. It's never something that anyone would have ever imagined that I do at the time. Where now people are like, now people associate me with working out. People associate me with being fit. People associate me with, so I feel like that's an interesting thing now, to have people associate me with what I look like now, or how I feel, or the way that I live my life now. And so, yeah, so that feels really good. It feels reassuring, to have people, just strangers even, be like, wow, you must work out a lot, or you look really buff. It was jacked. I think two different people told me I looked jacked, like randomly, like the guy who came to service our air conditioner. He was like, dude, you're jacked. I was like, oh, not really, but I'm working on it, so it's been an interesting process. And I think, yeah, I think for people who want to jumpstart that, just believe, yes, it is going to take work, but it's doable, and to just chip away at it, and it's a process. Yeah, and it doesn't stop. It keeps getting better.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. It is a little bit tough, but I would say, being miserable, obese, and full of disease is much, much harder. And so that is where the real difficulty is, staying that way, for sure. But Rob, thank you again. Let's try to do one again, maybe in like a half a year from now, see where you're at from there. Would love, yeah, I would love to have you as a guest again. And yeah, it was great. It was great coaching with you. I mean, time flies by. It felt like maybe 8 weeks, not like 6 or 7 months or 8 months or however long we stay together. And then everyone that showed up, thank you for joining the live, and have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.